So we are now live. We're with Sarah, who's actually in Cornwall. Was just telling me a little bit about her holiday. One of the nice things we're talking about working a bit more flexibly is you can go on holiday outside of the school time. So good time to head down to Cornwall and go to the Lost Gardens of Heligan, eh, Sarah?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, very much so. I've definitely taken advantage of that.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening and giving up your time, even on your holiday, to talk to our audience about how you started. So you were an English teacher and then you left that behind and you set up your international tutoring business. And when we had a phone call about it initially, I just couldn't believe how lovely this is and how well it works out for family and utilizing the skills that you've built whilst teaching, but also sort of staying in that teaching bubble. So, a really nice, interesting sidestep. So I'd love to learn a bit more about it. Please introduce yourself to everyone.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Yeah, so I'm Sarah. I'm conscious of the very loud seagulls outside the window, so I'm sorry if that's a little bit distracting. So I'm Sarah. I was head of English in a prep school, which was a full boarding school. And before that, I was head of English in a middle school in Staffordshire. I've been in teaching for 17 years and that passion has never gone away. So for me, this was the perfect sidestep because it allows me to teach English, which I love and have always loved, but also work with young people, which again has never diminished. It was the other things, I suppose, that made me want to move away from teaching and have something more flexible. So yes, that's pretty much my resume in 30 seconds.
Yeah, always good to know. I'm going to share your slides now and you can talk us through them and give our lovely teachers some tips and information on how to do this.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. So I run a tutoring business called Aster Tuition, which I have been doing for just over 2 years now. And I've recently set up Aster Academy, which will be launching in September. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I must get around about anywhere between 5 and 15 calls or emails a week from teachers asking me how I did what I did and sort of where I got to. And that's where the academy has come from. So I wanted to talk to you today about how you can, as teachers, start up a tutoring business and run it and grow it by talking through what I've done. So to go to the next slide. The tutoring world is, for any of you who tutor already or are thinking about it, it's a very, very busy market, but it's something that's hugely in demand, both nationally and internationally. And the longer I'm in it, the more I can see that demand. Sometimes it's hard to find. Sometimes it requires more of an effort to really see where those demands are. But there is definitely a place for every kind of tutor, I would say. And that's something that the more things that I go to, the more people I speak to, the more I can recognize that. So I want to talk to you today about how you can be successful no matter what your subject or background or niche. And niches is something that I've been, I suppose, introduced to with how my business has gone. And again, I'll talk about that in a minute. So I thought it might be helpful to give a bit of an overview of how I started and where I'm at now, because if I'm talking about how to grow a successful, lucrative business, I think it's important I kind of share what I've done. So you can see. So I was head of English in a prep school up until July 2020. So I left in, I don't know, with it sort of just before the second lockdown, I think. And I was a sort of one-woman tutor. And I was, my intention was to leave and tutor English because that's the subject that I love. So I started in September 2020 and I was basically tutoring online a handful of students in the local area and then a few from sort of contacts slightly further afield. But the majority were within a sort of 200-mile radius. And then I sort of grew in that time through word of mouth and recommendations. And in the following May, I started working with my first Chinese agent. And that was very much I suppose, the springboard for quite rapid growth. And I realized that that was the direction that I wanted to go in. In that September, I became an accredited member of the Boarding School Association, which for me was really important because I wanted to understand the international market. Again, I'll come back to this later. but the majority of students that I tutor internationally are looking to come to British schools. So it was important for me to understand that market really, really well. In the October, because of the demand from the Chinese agent that I was working with, I then needed to recruit freelance tutors. So I was then beginning to grow beyond my subject and into other areas of the curriculum. And then the following, January 2023, I then set up networks with 5 more international agents. Generally speaking, they are in Southeast Asia, but there are a few in the Caribbean and North America. And because of that success, I was then above the sort of pay threshold of £85,000, which means that I've then had to register for VAT. And I put that purely to kind of show where I've come from and sort of that level of kind of financial success and stability. So that's pretty much the sort of the key, I suppose, the sort of the key events on the timeline from teaching to where I am now. If that all makes sense. And then, yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier. The program that I have come up with and that is launching in September has come from demand, and these were the questions that I must have been getting, not every day, but certainly every week. How did you do it, and therefore how can I do it, and is it possible for me to do what you've done, and what do I need to know to get there? So I was having these conversations and trying to support teachers who perhaps wanted an insight into what I was doing, and that's where it's grown from. So it's been pretty much over the last sort of 12, 18 months of sort of building this, I suppose, this reputation as an internationally focused tutor. So these are the questions that I intend to sort of answer and support in the 12-week program. So just very briefly, the idea of the academy, it's a mentorship. So it's going to give you the tools to launch your own internationally minded tutoring business. And the idea is over the 3 months, you will sort of accelerate your growth. So all the things that took me 2 years to do, I've put into 12 weeks, and also avoiding the many mistakes that I made and the dead ends I went down that sometimes took me weeks and weeks and weeks to figure out. So the first month is all about key things that you need to overcome to help you grow your brand and really identify what your niche is. Then it's about taking action and making these meaningful collaborations. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but this idea of working with key partners and understanding how to build your network. And then finally, in the 3rd month, it's about how you can secure those clients and, guarantee the growth in order for you to become, successful in whatever measure you sort of identify that by. Katie, if I'm going too quickly, do tell me.
No, that's really good. I wondered if you could elaborate on, some of the mistakes that you've made and that cost you time and money, because I know setting up Did Teach, there was lots of, and I had to pivot,
Yeah.
so I was doing certain things and I just realized this isn't working or not right for my audience and I had to pivot. So yeah, is there any you would like to share with us?
How long do we have? I think pivoting is probably the best word ever to describe what I did for the first 12 months. It was second guessing myself. But I think I did not know anything other than how to teach English, which, I think I did pretty well. I think I still do pretty well. But I didn't know how to market my business. I didn't know what a brand was. I didn't know what content pillars were or what they were for. I didn't know the legal expectations of setting up as a tutoring business or a tutoring agency. I didn't have a grasp of HR. I didn't know, well, if you name it, I probably didn't know anything about it. So I spent a lot of money on some, high quality support, but I spent a lot of money on support that didn't really help me, that didn't help me grow, that didn't help me to develop the business, because at that point, I didn't know what I didn't know. So I was very much operating blind. There was nobody for me to talk to, because there was nobody that I could find in my position. And I therefore, I must have spent something like 8 weeks watching videos and making phone calls, trying to work out which legal documents I needed in order to operate as a tutoring business, and then what documents I needed in order to make sure that I got my payments from international clients, and then, how I would manage finances when so much of my money was coming from Southeast Asia. So all of these things that I often had to fumble my way through, I think, and some were more costly than others. I must have spent many hundreds of pounds on advisors that didn't really understand the tutoring world or the teaching world, and I think that was, a critical learning point for me, that there were a lot of people out there offering support, but they didn't necessarily understand what I was trying to do as a tutor. So there were quite a few things that I've basically distilled down into this course,
Mhm.
and all the things I wish I had known and that would have allowed me to grow much quicker. And I think, 2 years is pretty quick, isn't it?
I
But
think so, yeah.
if I'd known it within the first 3 months, I would have been, I could have grown more rapidly. I could have taken on people much more quickly. I could have known which markets to focus on and which markets to ignore, which countries were more viable and which countries, were not going to be worth identifying. So yeah, I think that's it's a huge area that I think
Mhm.
I've learned an enormous amount. But yeah, there's been a lot of mistakes made, and I say mistakes, but they were just things I did not know. My skill set was broad. You know that as teachers, we do a huge amount, but it's quite specific, isn't it? And I needed all those other bits and pieces in order to be able to to grow the business.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
Okay, no, that's fine. So yeah, these are sort of the five key things that, again, I'll be going into in much more detail on the program. But when I was thinking about, well, what principles will really support people and help them to establish a successful business, and the first one is this idea of just completely stepping out of teaching and going it alone. It's quite a scary, well, it's a massively scary thing. Financially, it's a big risk, isn't it? And if you've got a family, I have 2 children. It wasn't just a case of, oh, let's see what happens. I had to know it was going to work. And initially, I didn't know. And because I didn't have, a huge number of tutees to start with, it was a fairly rocky few months. And, I did have to put even more work into it than I did as a teacher in order to to grow the business. So that's one thing that I'll be, talking a lot about. And that links into the second one is, making sure that your business substitutes your salary. Nobody wants to leave teaching to then drop down. And in the current situation we're in economically, I very much doubt that that's what people would want to do. And I understand that. And the third one, this idea of selling into different markets, I didn't know when I was in teaching that there were certain areas of the world which really valued high quality teachers in order to support their child's move into UK schools. And that was a turning point for me, because finding and working with particularly those Chinese agents has been incredibly lucrative, financially, but also hugely rewarding. And it's allowed me to get a glimpse into a sort of an area of the world that I knew very little about. So one thing we'll be talking about is, how can you do that? How can you sort of identify these countries where there is a need, and what can you do in order to sort of break into it? And then that leads into social media. Well, we all use it, I've no doubt, but I had no clue initially what even my brand was, never mind how I'm supposed to promote it. And it took a lot of trial and error. And anybody that goes back to my sort of early days on my socials, you will see that it was more error than anything else. I didn't know what to write. I didn't know who my audience was, really. I didn't know what images to use. So now I have, a much slicker process. Everything I write is targeted. I follow, content pillars. So I think about whether it's going to be an inspirational post or an educational post or my journey, but all of it is sort of bringing people into my world, showing my expertise and my team's expertise, and really making it very clear what I do and how I can transform a child's sort of educational journey. But again, that took a lot of hair pulling to sort of figure that out, and understanding that some things work better than others. And then, number 5, I think, was hugely important for me. And this idea of surrounding yourself with the right people, that can mean, having supportive friends, but to step out of the classroom, where, I don't know about you, but I was certainly in the staff room when I had the time to chat with my colleagues and, have a coffee, and suddenly I'm on my own. I am sort of literally sitting on my own, and there's no one to talk to. And that can be quite, isolating. So I've sort of discovered over time that it's important to have people that support your growth, whether that is a business coach or an education coach, whether that is a networking community, whether that's other entrepreneurs. But certainly you need those people to challenge you, to support you, and to be there when, inevitably you have that day where everything goes wrong. So they're, I suppose, the key points really in terms of considering what you need to do in order to get things running, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that last point is really key for me as well. And I think there's some people who just get your business and they're excited by it and they want to learn more and they want to help you and they come up with ideas. And that's fantastic, isn't it, when you have those people in your corner? And there's some people that are really quite close to you who tell you it's a silly idea and don't support you. And it's almost like you have to just say, that's okay. It's okay if they don't get it. But like you say, surrounding yourself with those right kind of people that really you resonate with, they add value to you. You perhaps have ideas with their, even if you just go for a coffee with them and hash out some ideas. And you learn, I think, to single those people out quite quickly, don't you? Who are the ones that are genuinely interested in what I'm doing and can help me and add a bit of value here or a bit of support? So yeah, I do think that that's a really good point you made, number 5.
Yeah, definitely. And I think without that, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I think it would be completely negligent of me to miss that out. This isn't something that I have done on my own. I have sought out that help, and I've weeded out the help that's good and the help that's not really benefited me. And because I'm sort of surrounded by, a core group of people who get me and what I want to do and what I want to achieve and push me, that has made a massive difference. And people who've given, helped me to set targets, who've helped me to understand what it is I want to get out of a business. I'd never written a business plan before why would I have done, I suppose, but I'd never written a business plan. I'd never thought about forecasting. I'd never thought about this idea of knowing where I want to be in 5 years. But I set myself a target 12 months ago and I exceeded it, not just the financial target, but also the kind of the key things I wanted to get my business to. But I would not have done that had I not had that support network. So yeah, it's massively important. I agree completely. These are sort of a few things that I think people can go away and do and sort of consider if they want to get into this sort of world of tutoring. And it's what I wish I had done early on. But, following other tutoring companies, other educational agents, international recruiters, universities, whatever it is, start to follow them and look at what they post and look at the expertise that they are sharing. There is, LinkedIn is fantastic for this. I only started to use LinkedIn properly about 12 months ago, and it has been a massive game changer for me in terms of sort of propelling things forwards and really sharing sort of Aster Tuition outside of the UK. But I followed many, many people for months before really kind of understanding how they could be of use to me. So do start following those people, do start making notes, and kind of it will help you to decide which direction you want to go in as well. There are so many interesting people out there, and they have different kind of areas of the market, whether it's working with students who are currently being homeschooled, whether it's working with children who are sort of neurodivergent. There's whole different communities out there, and it's really, really valuable to start following these experts. One thing I wish I'd done, and I didn't, is, and it might sound really obvious, is working out how much you want to earn and understanding how you were going to get there and using that to work out what you need to charge per hour. Now, I can't speak for anyone other than myself, but I was really hugely uncomfortable with this idea of charging a certain amount or what I felt was reasonable. And I'd have these really awkward conversations with parents or clients saying, would it be okay if and I'm not like that anymore. And now I enjoy selling, and I enjoy, and I'm proud of the expertise that I offer. And the fees and the lesson charges reflect that, but you absolutely need to work out what it is you need to live off, and then work backwards, and that will make a massive difference to you being able to plan effectively. And then this final one of using socials to share your voice, a very wise person told me and said to me, if there was one thing that you could go back and say to either somebody who was in your school community, or somebody you respected, about how you would like to do things differently, or what you feel that you could offer where perhaps your voice wasn't heard, what would that be? And I sat and wrote that down, and I try and do something like that every week just to keep me on track. But I think it would really help you to see, where you want to go and the kind of tutor, or the kind of sort of tutoring owner you want to be. And I do very much now use socials to, as a platform to share what my thoughts are, as well as, allowing people into the brand and kind of bringing them in. So they're just a few things to get you started. Now, these 4 things here are what I focus on within the 12-week program. Mainly because this is what so many teachers say to me. These are the fears that they have, and why they perhaps won't take that step, or feel they can't take that step away from the classroom. So this fear of not having a stable income, not knowing how to run a business, not having the right connections in order to be able to grow successfully, and then not understanding the international sector. And these are things that I cover, because I think it's important that people do have that confidence and understanding and that self-belief that they can do it. And also because I have those connections, because I now know how to run a business and have a good income and a good awareness of the international sector, they're all those sort of things I'm going to be sharing, which I wish I had known, again, 2 years ago. But they're all legitimate and understandable concerns. And I think, these are the worries that I had, and did make me wobble a little bit. So I'm not sure what your thoughts are, Katie, but certainly I think they are probably the main things holding people back from leaving the classroom potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I do hear that most often is, I can't find jobs with the similar salary to teaching. And that is tricky, isn't it,
Yeah.
to get that? And yes, you probably do need to upskill and learn these things. And sometimes you can find it, you can find this magic job, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to take a little bit of a pay hit. It's not always as much as you think, due to pension contributions, but there will be a little bit of
Yeah.
a pay hit. So what can you manage without? So when we were setting up our business as well, how can you streamline your own personal finances? So just having that bit of awareness of it is important, but
Yeah.
it shouldn't stop you taking the leap, should it? I don't
No.
think it's something
No.
that should hold you back. And like you've said, you're now making more, aren't you, than you were
Oh,
when you were a teacher?
yes. More than, well, almost 3 times as much. And I certainly didn't anticipate that. I wanted the flexibility of being able to travel. My partner lives in Sweden, and all I wanted to start with was enough money to get by, in order to be able to be between England and Sweden. Um, and that was it. And it wasn't until, months progressed and other opportunities presented themselves to me, because of the connections that I was establishing, that suddenly, I kind of realized, actually, this is a very, very, successful business, and I could make it even more successful. And one of the reasons that the international sector is is of interest to so many people is the daytime working, and that's definitely something that I think more than anything initially, the thought of just being able to work in the daytime was a huge factor for me. And the way you're nodding, I think you get that. You must hear that from teachers all the time.
Definitely.
I started off just tutoring in the evenings and weekends. The most unsociable times when everybody else was free, but I wasn't. And I realised that actually I want to just be able to work in the daytime. So now, predominantly, I will work in the mornings because most of my students are in China. And actually, my tutoring is reduced because I'm managing things more. But one of the things I love is that my day starts at 8 and finishes at 1 on the days that I am tutoring. And I think it's that. More than anything that many teachers come to me for, it's, well, how do I get that daytime work, and is it possible? And the answer is yes. And then it's a case of understanding which area of the market you want. Do you want to work with Chinese students who are looking to come to UK boarding schools? Do you want to work with students in Singapore who are looking to stay in Singapore until they come to a UK university? And then building that trust and that loyalty. But yes, it's these are sort of the key things that I think that I cover because of what I went through and what teachers come to me saying a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the cost of the academy. So it will just be £500 plus VAT initially, purely because this is my beta testing phase, where in return for the low price, I will be expecting and hoping for reviews and testimonials in order to grow the academy and to make sure that it's as strong and supportive for tutors as it can be. And then once this first cohort goes through in January 2024, it will be the full price of £1,500 plus VAT. But if I go to the next slide, there is a QR code here. So there are 18 spaces, and there'll be no more than that. I want to make sure that it's a really good size, that people get a lot from me. So if you click on the QR code, it takes you to a landing page with more details. You can register on there, and then we can either have a Zoom call where we can go through any further questions that people have, or any issues or concerns or queries, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah. And just to sort of understand a bit more, is this something you can do whilst you're teaching? So can you sort of gradually set up this business whilst you're teaching, and as you grow that, you can reduce your hours? I mean, how did you do it to start with?
Yeah, so I did it. I mean, I was working full time and tutoring evenings and weekends, which was really, really draining and not necessarily sustainable for any length of time. But I needed to make sure I had some kind of a buffer for when I left. But the idea of this program would be to try and avoid having to do all those things that I did. So ensuring that after those 3 months that they have that teachers have the sort of the toolkit there to be able to sort of propel themselves much more quickly. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Katie. I've designed this for people who are still working as teachers. So the course will run at a time, on a weekday evening, and there will be opportunities there for people to still be working in the daytime and do this, and everything will be recorded anyway. So they sort of catch up with everything. But the idea is that I'm supporting teachers who are already in the classroom, who have not left yet, and just need that final bit of nurturing and guidance in order to feel that they are confident enough to then leave.
Yeah. And the end result, so after they go through your academy, what can they sort of expect to then do for themselves?
Yeah, so at that point, there are a couple of options. Obviously, I'm not guaranteeing work through Aster Tuition, but we are growing very, very rapidly. And we're now working with, I think it's between, last time I checked, it was sort of over 11 countries. So I'm always looking for, excellent internationally minded tutors to work with me, particularly those who are available in the daytime, because that's now the biggest area of my market, particularly for English, science and humanities teachers, predominantly, but also at the end of those 12 weeks, they will have everything that took me 2 years to have. So I obviously can't guarantee that you'll be earning six figures at the end of this 12-week program. I would never promise that to anybody, and I wouldn't believe anybody that said that. But they are. I am distilling down everything I've learned, and all the support I've had, and all of the programs that I've sort of subscribed to within those 12 weeks. So they will get each week there will be a different element, and there'll also be experts coming in to talk to us. So they'll be speaking to branding experts who are, prolific on social media and know just how to sort of position the brands well. We'll also be talking to boarding school agents and Chinese agents so they can understand exactly what those markets are looking for. And the idea is that they will have established a niche. So my niche is very much the sort of the Chinese market. That's pretty much 80% of my business, and that's what I focus on predominantly. And the idea is that people will have an idea whether they want to work with the South American market, whether they want to focus on the European market, whether it is Southeast Asia. And again, it will depend on what they're looking for.
Yeah. And is there scope for primary teachers as well as
Oh,
secondary
absolutely.
teachers?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I within my team, I have early years teachers who get a lot of work again from the Chinese market. So early years teachers are in demand. Primary teachers, particularly those who can offer 7+ and 11+ support. And again, that's something we will cover, those key transition points and what that means for international parents who are often looking for support at least 2 to 3 years in advance. And then it is worth noting that particularly with Chinese parents and agents, once they found a tutor that they trust and can work with, they will stay with them for many years afterwards. So I have students who I started with when they were doing the 8+, the 10+, and who stayed with me towards their GCSEs, well, slightly, I think it's 10+, just heading towards their GCSEs, because they have that rapport and they really value that loyalty. So if you're looking for long-term clients, which I think most people are, then that's certainly something that we would cover as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's really nice to hear. And I did ask if there were any questions. There's a couple in the chat. Can you see that, Sarah?
I can't actually. No, I can't.
Okay. So Gemma was asking, do you run as a tuition business or an agency?
Okay, this is something that took me months to figure out because there's so many legal guidelines and things have changed. So I run as a tutoring business, not an agency. So a tutoring agency takes a initial cut from a tutor and then sort of sends them off to work independently, where I operate as a tutoring business. So the tutors work, they're freelance, but I kind of monitor the children's progression. I liaise with the parents. So that was a deliberate choice. I wanted to very much have this sort of Aster Tuition family, I suppose.
Yeah. And Christopher, I think you probably answered Christopher's question, but he was sort of saying about the steps that you took from transitioning it out of working in a school to working solely as a business, but you did kind of cover that. Do you want to just retouch on that in case he missed it?
Yeah, and I'll try and keep it brief. I'm not very good at being succinct. I'm sorry, it's the English teacher in me. But I left to become a sort of basically a single subject tutor. So I was I left my school. I was an English tutor, and then I was a sole trader. Then I began working with agents and multiple parents from the Northwest through to London. And because there was a demand, I then went from being a single tutor to a tutoring business, then set up my limited company because things had grown so rapidly. And it was the most sensible thing to do. And now I am, a fairly large tutoring business with sort of partnerships globally. That's probably the very quick way of explaining that.
Yeah, no, I think that helps. And Fiona is asking if you have any advice about recruiting others to work with you as your business expands.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, because you need to find people who gel with you, who understand what it is you want from them. And I'm really fortunate that the tutors that I work with are absolutely fantastic. They're all experienced teachers. They've all worked for several years. like most teachers, incredibly hardworking, passionate about their subjects. And that was really important to me. I wanted teachers who loved teaching maths, who loved teaching English, because that passion then comes through. And it's slightly different when you're an online tutor. Well, it's very different from being teaching a class of 30 to teaching, a one-to-one online. But I wanted to make sure that they had that enthusiasm. So I have an initial talk with a potential tutor. We talk through their CV, their experience. I can then gauge, their level of interest, and I have set questions. So I've gone through various different kinds of questions to ask. Some were better than others, and I've sort of refined it down now. But I basically want people who are as enthusiastic as I am, and who understand, particularly for the Chinese market, that you need to be responsive and efficient. And that was something that was very important to me. So yeah, you need people who are like-minded. There's always a risk with anybody that you take on, but you see very quickly whether they're going to gel with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Claire's asked, and I thought this is an interesting question as well, about do you need any international teaching experience, or is it beneficial if they've lived in certain parts of Asia before and they obviously know the UK system? Is that helpful, or does it not matter at all?
I think it's definitely useful. I have only worked in UK schools, so I've never worked in international schools outside of this country. And I think if I had, it would have given me more of an insight. I think it's hugely important to understand different sort of cultural expectations, and so it's certainly useful. I have a couple of tutors who work with me who worked in international schools in China and Vietnam. So they had an awareness and understanding of, parental expectations. So they understood that parents expected a certain level in terms of homework and grading. So, there are, I'm not speaking for entire countries here, but the Chinese agents and parents I work with have very high expectations in terms of what they want from the tutors and what they expect their child to be able to do. So if you've worked in an international school, then you will understand that, much more quickly, and because you've been immersed in that. So I definitely think it helps.
Okay, and we have a question here from Jane. I already work with one agent, but I'm at capacity and now looking to scale. How did you build a relationship with other agents without being able to teach for them?
Yeah, I think that's really good. And actually, that's a really key point, this idea of I realised that I could not scale my business if I was tutoring all the time. It's just impossible. So I think well done to, figuring out actually probably more quickly than I did that in order to be able to scale, you need to have those people to do it for you. So I made sure that I had excellent tutors working with me, and tutors who I felt both represented the brand, but also were that taught in a way that meant that I was completely confident in their abilities. So I would speak to agents and say, I've got a fantastic tutoring team. These are the subjects they can offer. These are their subject specialisms. And I sent out these bios with those brief details. I didn't say anything about me being a tutor. I just explained that I sort of managed and supported the tutors and helped with curriculum planning. And those agents sort of quickly realised that the team was excellent. But most agents, to start off with, would take one tutor and one subject and really sort of feel their way through. So it's very important that you have that complete trust in your team. And I don't think there's any harm in starting off with one other tutor and then building from there. And that's certainly what I did with two of the agents that I work with. It was one tutor, one subject. And then they kind of said to me, actually, these tutors are brilliant. We now want to be running weekly masterclasses throughout the summer. And who do you have? So once you've established that, that excellent working relationship, and they can see that you know what you're doing and that you can provide what they're looking for and exceed those expectations, then I definitely think they will buy into more.
Yeah, fantastic. And another question here from Simon. How do you deal with the issues of your tutors being introduced to clients through you and then arranging their own private arrangements, i.e. potentially cutting you out to increase their own income?
Yeah, and again, that's an excellent question. And that You know, the easy answer is there's very little you can do. I have legal, contracts that my tutors sign and that parents sign that explain that they can't work with those parents independently, or the client arrangements are with me. Now, I've been very fortunate, touch wood, that that's never been an issue in the last 2 years, and I think that's partly because of the tutors that I've chosen to work with me through Aster Tuition, and also the agents that I work with. I made it very clear early on that, that this is my team, and actually everything will be dealt with through me. But the agents have been fantastic, because they know that it's much easier to work with me, and for me to kind of give them an excellent pool of tutors than it is for them to be going out and finding 7, 8, 9, 10 different tutors.
Yeah, absolutely. And an interesting question here as well about safeguarding.
Yeah.
Like, how do you safeguard yourself? Do you film everything? Like, how do you know that
Yeah.
everything and that other people are being safe as well? Because obviously you have to look after your tutors as well as the
Absolutely.
students.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where the HR advice that I got was really helpful. So the legal documents I have, and the safeguarding documents that I have, and all of my tutors do safeguarding training, so online safeguarding training. I also belong to a tutoring community called Qualified Tutor, where we I've had, they're fantastic and a really supportive body, and they help and support with a lot of those areas as well. But I think having rigorous terms and conditions, documents, very clear expectations. I always do the designated safeguarding lead training every year. And I think as long as you follow the protocols in the way that you would do within a school, then that's as much as you can do. But you need to make sure that you have everything in place. Therefore, you're as protected as you can be. But I worked early on with a really helpful legal team to make sure that I had everything I needed, both to support my clients and to support my tutors.
Fantastic. And what platform do you use to teach?
Great question. And that's, again, something that I'm covering in the program, because for the majority of the time we use Zoom, but for certain clients, particularly mainland China, it doesn't always work. So we have to use, again, pivoting here. I learned that early on, that we'd have to pivot to use other platforms. Now, I'm not the most fantastically technologically literate person, so I've had to really upskill myself on that. So I've learned how to use Tencent's sort of Chinese version of Zoom, ClassIn, and various other platforms, WeChat. But that was a fairly steep learning curve. But it's making sure that you have the right technology and the right platforms for the right market.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I mean, I think it's such an exciting idea, really. And when I first spoke to you, I just couldn't even believe that I didn't think of this before. Everyone is asking me, I'd love to go into tutoring, absolutely passionate about my subject, passionate about making a difference to young people's lives. But how do I do that and still have a life myself? And that's the quandary. And when when we spoke on the phone first, I literally could not believe what you were saying about how wonderful this market is and how perfect it is for teachers from this system, and how they're valued, I guess, elsewhere as well. So,
Absolutely.
it's been fantastic. Just sort of hearing a bit more about your journey and about how you did it. And I think you've offered a lot of nice tips as well to
I hope
others.
so.
That you can go on and do this yourself, and then if you feel that you need that support, then Sarah's there for you, with very limited spaces, I might add. 18, is that's the case?
Deliberately, I wanted to keep it
Yeah.
deliberately low to ensure that people got that, that support from me. I didn't want it to be, a huge thing, because I wanted to try and give them as much help as I could.
Yeah. And that will be, I guess, live sessions, and they'll be recorded as well in case people miss them.
Yeah,
Or
definitely. So everything will be live, but everything will be, every session will be recorded. And I will be starting at the beginning of the academic year, so the beginning of September. Again, I think it gives teachers that support network initially, to give them the kind of the confidence and the tools to be able to set up on their own and leave the classroom with confidence.
Yeah, Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time.
No,
Thank
thank
you all
you.
of you for listening as well. And if you missed any of it, we will upload it to the YouTube channel and you can rewind and watch to your heart's content. But Sarah, please enjoy your holiday in
I
Cornwall,
will.
taking time off before the school holidays. How dare you?
I know, don't tell anyone. Thanks, Katie.
Absolutely. No, it's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah, hopefully we can have you on again soon, talking about how the academy's going. That would be
Yeah, I'd
fantastic
love that.
to
Thank
learn
you ever so
a bit
much.
more about that. But yeah, wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.